you. Good morning, everyone. It's my pleasure today to be joined to my left by Robert Mejica, who is the Budget Director for the State of New York, and to my right, Michael Schmidt, who is the Senior Economic Advisor to me. We want to chat about federal tax actions today and the effect on New York. As most people know, we had a Federal Tax Reform Act that was passed last December that was transformative for this country and very negative for this state. By President Trump's Federal Tax Reform Act, 80% of the benefits went to the top 1% of Americans. It cost New York State $14 billion annually. That is on top of the fact that New York State is already the #1 donor state to the federal government. Donor state meaning we give $48 billion more to Washington than we get back. That has been the fact for a long period of time. God rest the soul of Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan. He constantly railed against this. But that inequity is then exacerbated by an additional $14 billion by the Tax Reform Act in December. We took drastic action to protect New Yorkers. We decoupled the federal law that would have increased taxes in the state. We changed the state tax code to facilitate deductibility and making them charitable contributions. And we filed a lawsuit against the federal government because we believe that it is unconstitutional. At that time, I said repeatedly, this is not an abstract danger to New York. It is going to make us less competitive, and the loss of full deductibility can affect negatively the value of homes. When you talk about affecting home value, you're talking about taking money out of the pocket of hardworking New York families. #1 asset for most American families is the equity they have in their home. The first small business loan is the equity you have in your home. The #1 retirement fund is the equity that you have in your home. When you affect home values, it has a dramatic effect on the lives of people. And I said I believed the loss of the full SALT deduction was going to do that. Moody's actually came out and said they believed that SALT would have a negative effect on the home values, especially in New York. And Moody's forecasted a percentage of loss of growth in home values in New York State. Westchester County was at the top of the list, a 10% loss of growth. New York City, 9.5. Nassau County, 9.2. These are the high tax areas, and therefore they would take the larger hit. When you look at a map that Moody's did of where they said the home values would be reduced, you see that they're predominantly in the Northeast, some in California. Those are the 2 states that were most dramatically hit. But 19 out of the 25 most impacted counties are New York or New Jersey. So this was a very purposeful, targeted, direct hit to, coincidentally, Democratic states, and I don't believe in coincidences, but 12 states, all Democratic, New York at the top of the list. Bloomberg now runs an article that says home sales in Westchester have plunged 18%, and that is July 12th, which follows what Moody's was forecasting when SALT first happened. Now today, to add insult to injury to what they did last December, The Trump administration has announced that they are unilaterally considering an additional tax cut that they would do administratively, because they can't get the Congress to do any more tax cuts for the rich, but that they would administratively do an additional tax cut by reducing the capital gains. How can they do that? They would redefine the cost of capital gains. And what they would do is they would adjust the basis by the rate of inflation. In other words, if you bought something 10 years ago for $100,000 and you sell it today, right now, $100,000 is your basis in that asset. They would say, no, it's not $100,000. It's $100,000 adjusted by the rate of inflation. So it would reduce your tax liability under capital gains. That benefit would cost the nation $100 billion. It would cost New York State $500 million per year, which is devastating to the state of New York. $500 million is a significant cut to our budget. And once again, who would benefit from the capital gains cuts? The richest 1%. 80% goes to the richest 1%, 90% goes to the top 5%. So it would actually be exacerbating the injustice that they did in the tax code in December, and once again, it would be negatively impacting the state of New York. We believe it's unconstitutional. The Constitution makes it very clear that taxing power lies with the Congress, that bills on taxation emanate from the House of Representatives. This is not a new idea, like SALT was not a new idea, by the way. SALT was attempted by President Reagan. This isn't a new idea either. President Bush proposed or considered the same idea, where the Department of Treasury would unilaterally define cost to bypass Congress. President Bush's Department of Justice said it's illegal, so he didn't go ahead. But it is the same proposal they're considering now. So it's another giveaway to the richest Americans. It hurts New York. Our congressional members need to stand up and act in the best interest of New Yorkers, which some of them did not do last December when they passed the tax bill. This is deja vu all over again, right? This is a second tax act. This is done administratively and unilaterally, but Congress should stand up and say no. The Trump administration does not have the power to do it. It's the province of Congress. We're not giving the rich another tax break, and we're not hurting the state of New York again. That is their obligation as elected officials from the state of New York. If they don't do that, and the Trump administration gets away with this, then I'm going to propose decoupling the New York tax code from the federal tax code. Otherwise, we would lose the $500 million, because we are now coupled for purposes of determining capital gains and federal, through your federal adjusted income. We would decouple so we don't lose the $500 million, because we can't afford to lose the $500 million. And I would put this on the table as soon as the legislature comes back in January. The federal government has done too much damage to New York already. The Tax Reform Act, they want to take away a woman's right to choose with Roe v. Wade. They're assaulting new immigrants as they come across the border, which we believe is a violation of due process. They have been unjust in the way they've allocated taxes last December, and this would even make it worse. So our job is to stand up for New York values and the rights and interests of New Yorkers, and that's what we're doing. Two other quick issues as asides. Number one, the NRA sued me last week, and the state of New York, saying that we, in essence, their papers said we jeopardized their financial health. Well, apparently it's not that jeopardized, or they've had a very quick rebound in their health, because they announced yesterday that they're going to do a $1 million campaign to get Judge Kavanaugh approved and confirmed by the U.S. Senate. And they're going to spend $1 million of their own money to do that. If they have $1 million to do a campaign for Judge Kavanaugh, obviously their financial health isn't that bad, right? Which is the exact opposite of what they said in the court papers just a few days before. So I would never doubt their credibility. Therefore, they must have had a very quick rebound in their financial health in the span of 48 hours. I think it shows their duplicity and, once again, how they are loose with facts and loose with the truth. And it says that they were fraudulent in their papers. And it also shows that from the NRA's point of view, they own the President of the United States, who did a White House conference the day after Parkland, where he actually sounded like a reasonable human being on the issue of guns, met with the NRA and did a 180-degree reversal, and the next day was against everything. So they control the president, they control the Congress, and now they want to control the Supreme Court. It would be a trifecta for the NRA. They control every branch of the federal government. They have stymied gun reform in this country, almost single-handedly, because they are bullies and they are extortionists and they frighten the Republicans in Congress by suggesting that they're not conservative enough, which would then open up all the Republicans to primaries, and they actually stop compromise, common sense gun reform. 90% of the American people say they want background checks. How can they not be passed? Because the NRA won't allow any compromise. Second, after this press conference, I'm going to be going to Great Meadow, which is a state correctional facility, one of the biggest, 1,400 inmates. It has been placed on what's called lockdown. Lockdown is where the inmates are in their cells, and they remain in their cells while the facility is being searched. There were incidents of violence which caused the facility to take the precaution of locking down the facility while they search the entire facility. It's a big facility, so it would take some time to make sure all the weapons are out of the facility. It's very important for the safety of the guards and the inmates that this be done. But it is, we've had a rash of increased gang violence lately. And this is probably our 5th or 6th lockdown of a major maximum security prison. So I'm going to visit with the superintendent. I want to get debriefed on the circumstances, because we're starting to see a pattern of these increased gang violence. And it is very problematic for the prison system. They had about 25 people engaged in a gang fight. And people get hurt, people can get killed, guards can get killed, and it can very quickly spread. So it's one of the nightmares in prison management. And I'll be going up and getting debriefed by the superintendent and prison officials right after this. Any questions?
Alex Taylor from New York Post. Do you agree with Cynthia Nixon that the Taylor Law, which bars government employees from striking, should be repealed?
No. No. Not if you believe a police officer should respond when you call 911, or a fireman should come to the home, God forbid your house is on fire, or a prison guard should guard a prison. These are essential services, and the premise of the Taylor Law is you would have chaos if certain services were not provided.
The 6 states that have essentially Taylor Law revocation or allow public unions to strike nonetheless do have carve-outs for essential services. So it doesn't in those states, Pennsylvania included among them, affect corrections, fire personnel.
But then you're not repealing the Taylor Law.
Well, then
You're modifying. Yeah,
So
that would
how
be.
do you feel about modifying the Taylor
Well, that would be a different proposal. How do you want to modify it?
How do you feel about public union workers other than essential services?
Other than what? How do you define essential services?
Well, you can carve it out. You rattled off a few emergency service type ones or law
So
enforcement.
I'm saying this is now a new proposal. This is your proposal.
No, this is Ms. Nixon's tentative early proposal. I don't think it's all spelled out.
What does she
But
carve out?
She had mentioned a carve out, broadly speaking, for categories like the ones you enumerated.
Like
Emergency services and.
Police?
Police, fire.
prison
corrections.
guards,
I believe so.
ambulance drivers,
That's part of
emergency workers,
Yeah.
utility workers, first responders?
Well, utility workers, I know. How about
Yeah.
teachers?
Well, then it's a different
Biggest
proposal.
category is
Teachers? Yeah, that's a different proposal.
Anything else, guys?
Yes, Brittany Gibson, Daily News. Back to the tax code that you were talking about earlier in the first part of the presentation. Do you see yourself working with your counterpart in New Jersey, Governor Phil Murphy, or even extending this kind of decoupling to other states that you feel like are being targeted?
Everything we do in collaboration with other states. I don't see how other states don't decouple, because it's yet another significant loss of revenue. It's a great boondoggle for the very rich, and then it's a very significant hit on your existing state budget projections. So we did a budget director, we did a budget based on a presumption of revenue. This would change that to the tune of $500 million, which is a very significant difference.
Yes, and I understand that, but just based on the graph you had, you were talking about other states that were being targeted by this and would lose significant amounts of money as well. Have you talked to Phil Murphy about
Not yet.
collaboration?
Not yet. We're also looking at the law because, and we're not ruling out a lawsuit on this. The law is clear that Congress is supposed to make legislation regarding taxation, and this is trying to do by regulation that which they can't get done by legislation. It's interesting. It's everything they accused President Obama of, right? That he was using regulatory ability and executive orders to bypass the legislative process. This is clearly in the province of the Congress. They should go to the Congress and say, we want to redefine capital gains. That's what Bush's Department of Justice said. Now, the President's Department of Justice, I don't really believe is a Department of Justice. It's a Department of something. I don't know what Department of Justice would have allowed them to do what they did on the border and take children from families. So I wouldn't refer to this as a Department of Justice, because that's not justice. It's a violation of due process. It's anti-American. But a former Department of Justice for a Republican president said this is not legal. So I think there's a very strong lawsuit. There's some questions on the state's standing to bring that lawsuit. But I think it's a very strong lawsuit.
Late arrival, I just wanted to ask, Kathy Hochul, your lieutenant governor, opened up a line of attack on Jumaane Williams regarding personal finances. He's sort of claiming offense on that. Do you think it's a legitimate issue to raise in the context of the campaign?
I agree with the editorials that have been written, Zach. Release of taxes, disclosure, transparency is, of course, a legitimate topic. It's a topic in every campaign going back decades. Release of taxes is how people get a chance to see how you live your life, etc. I've done it every campaign. You've been tenacious in past campaigns with me saying, how many years, how many years? Normally the question is how many years, right? But yes.
And regarding single-payer health care, I know you said you support it, but it's had trouble getting through the legislature. Now there's a study out from the Rand Corporation, of all places, that says it could actually be beneficial. Is that something you would look for to do in a third term, or do you think that's kind of a non-starter with the legislature?
You know, it's something that we would look at with the legislature, certainly. The Rand study was, I don't know that it's necessarily determinative because it made many assumptions in how costs would be allocated. So I don't know that that is necessarily the best path forward, but it's certainly something I'll look at with the legislature.
And finally, just on the NRA, I just want to ask about, forgive me, I came late, but just their claim of poverty, given their fight with New York State and your response to their claim of poverty.
Well, that's why you can't come late. Because I was quite eloquent on the topic before you came in. The NRA sues me saying basically that we're hurting their ability to be financially sustainable. Yesterday, they announced a $1 million campaign to get Judge Kavanaugh confirmed. How do you have $1 million to wage a campaign to get Judge Kavanaugh confirmed after you just said in court papers that you were basically on almost insolvent because of what I'm doing to them financially? You can't have it both ways. You can't be insolvent 2 days ago, and today you're announcing $1 million campaign to get Judge Kavanaugh confirmed. If you have $1 million to wage a political campaign, you're obviously not broke, right? And you're not obviously not in a situation of financial distress. So it's bogus. They are bogus. Their claims to the court were bogus. The lawyer who signed those papers should be ashamed of himself or herself. When you sign court documents, they're supposed to be truthful. How can you say that your financial stability is being threatened and then 2 days later say, we're doing $1 million to get Judge Kavanaugh confirmed? And from a political point of view, they already own the President of the United States. They own the Congress. Now they want to own the Supreme Court. And they say, we want Kavanaugh because he is our guy on our issue. That's why all the conservatives signed off on him. Well, you know, would be the trifecta for the NRA to control the entire federal government, the President, the Congress, and the Supreme Court. And that's exactly what they're trying to do.
Majority Leader Flanagan says Senate Republicans are standing by to reauthorize speed cameras as long as they stick with the original number, 140 in New York City, and abandon, at least for the time being, expanding them. As a general principle, how do you feel about that?
Great.
Is there a take half a loaf?
Great. Great. They have that bill. They don't have to stand by. They should get in their vehicles or in the train or in the plane, go to Albany and pass that bill. They have they have that bill, don't they?
It's an omnibus bill, which they still pass.
That bill is on their desk in Albany.
And it means helping the assembly come around to that position? Is that something you're
The
prepared to
assembly
go
passed that bill
with the 140?
with the 140 that was in the omnibus.
They said they're gonna pass, if they can also just introduce the bill themselves and pass that bill themselves and do it, which they haven't done. So they've said that, they haven't done it, they could do that at any time. So they can just go pass that bill.
Thanks, guys.
It's baloney. I want to pass the bill. Then pass the bill. You don't need a declaration of a special session. You don't need a thunderbolt to come down. You don't need anything. You don't need the assembly to act. Pass the bill. The assembly already passed that bill. It was in an omnibus bill, but they can pass that bill. They can pass their own bill. Just pass the bill. It's a game. If they wanted to pass the bill, they would pass the bill. They don't want to pass the bill. We were in Albany for 6 months arguing about it. They don't want to pass the bill. They don't want to say it that directly because they don't want to draw the ire of the people who support the speed cameras, but they don't want to pass the bill. You know how you know? They didn't pass the bill. At one point, the truth will out. If they wanted to pass the bill, January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, they would have passed the bill.
Quick comment on Congressman Collins' indictment. Any thoughts?
I don't think Congressman Collins was fit to represent Western New York before the indictment. I believe his vote on the tax bill that capped the deductibility, the SALT deductibility for the people in his own district, he consistently was reprehensible. He consistently put his political affiliation ahead of the people of his district. Consistently. The tax bill hurt New York State directly. And it had a penalty for New York State that, and 11 other states, that no other states had. How, as a congressperson, do you justify voting for a bill that disproportionately hurts your state? How do you do that? Well, I'm a good party guy, and my leaders, and I'm close to the president, and he wanted me to carry his bill. You're supposed to carry the bill that works for your district, not for your party boss. So I don't think he was fit to hold office before yesterday. After yesterday, should he resign or not, you know, that's up to him. But I didn't think he was capable of representing the interest of his district before yesterday.
But any thoughts on the charges as a former prosecutor yourself?
Look, they are very, very serious. And lying to the FBI is a fairly straightforward charge. There's not a lot of nuance to it. It doesn't get into the underlying facts. It just gets into the representation made to the FBI. So that's a very, from his point of view, I think it's a highly problematic charge.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, guys.